Welcome to One More Trip Podcast, a podcast dedicated to people who want to travel the world with an edify. I'm your host, Juan. In this week's podcast, we have a conversation with Amanda, who's experienced traveler, is going to share with us how one backpacking trip in her 20s to South Asia changed her entire career trajectory. Amanda now spends her time supporting emergency housing and resettlement of displaced refugees from conflict zones. My apologies for the low energy during the pod. It had been a long week of travel and work. Let's start the show.
Actually, I had studied abroad in Dublin for like 5 months. And then I'd also lived in South Korea for a year teaching English. And then after I was in South Korea, I backpacked for about 5 months and was in starting in Bangkok. I kind of like did like an S. So, or I guess that's an N. But yeah, so went up Bangkok, across down Laos, across Cambodia, and then up Vietnam, and then came back home.
So how old were you when this happened?
I moved to Korea when I was 22.
So by 22, you have done most travel that most people I know by 22.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because like my family are very much like my dad got to travel a lot when I was a kid for work, but it was always for work. But like for me, I grew up hearing like he was in Switzerland, he was in Macau, he was in Japan. So it always made me interested in it. But then like on the other side, when my dad would have like downtime, we would like take road trips to like Colonial Williamsburg. We were not traveling with him that way. And like the way my brother travels is like he does like the all-inclusive in Mexico, which can be really amazing, but it was not me spending like $3 on a hostel in Vietnam to stretch my budget.
Hey, that's such a like different trajectory that you chose. What do you think you chose to do things a little bit different?
I think for me it was always just like maybe it's also like a New York City thing too, that like I like having grown up in this area, like there are so many cultures and languages and types of food that once I really got like, I think traveling to Ireland, like really first was a safe space because it's like an English speaking country. It was a 5-hour flight from home, but it like really gave me this is so much easier than I thought it could be to do this on my own. And then coming back to New York, every time I would try something, I was like, oh, well, I really love Thai food. I wonder if it's better in Thailand or like things like that. So I think also just being so exposed to so many cultures and different types of people in New York have made me want to travel more.
I think exposure is key, especially, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I moved a lot when I was growing up, different countries, and definitely being out since you're little, and it's not even your choice. You just have to be in a different place and always being labeled with like you're immigrant and you're from different place. For some people might make them, I just want to go home and be comfortable. For me, it was more, if you're too similar to me, I'm not interested. Yeah. And when I see someone that is very different, I'm like, all right, tell me more. It's bizarre, but that's kind of like the reaction of those experiences have. Let me ask you, was teaching English in South Korea before or after Ireland?
After. So I went to Ireland junior year of college, and then I was in Korea the year after I graduated. So Hannah and I were like parallel. She was in Costa Rica when I was in South Korea.
I see. So you're studying, I guess you're still in college, you're studying abroad in Ireland. How was the first week?
I was so tired. It was my like first experience with jet lag. And now I think about it and I'm like, I think Hannah probably told you, but like I was in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago for work. And it literally, to get there, I had to fly to Warsaw. And then I had to take a train from Warsaw to Chełm, which is like on the border. And that's 5 hours. And then you have to wait till like midnight in the dark. And then you take another train over the border, and it takes like 12 hours because you have to stop for like a double border crossing point with your passport. So the whole journey to get from like New York to Kyiv, because the airports are closed in Ukraine, was something like 30 hours. And and now I think about like my direct flight from New York to Dublin, which was like 6 hours, and I was so tired. And like I was doing an internship there, and my first day of the internship, I like fell asleep at my desk. It was so embarrassing. And it's like amazing how like in 10 years of traveling, I've just had to find so many like coping mechanisms. But yeah, I was just really, really excited. Like, I was living with two other girls from my program, and it maybe it was like the English thing, but also like I was living off of a college campus. I was living off of like the back area of like where Trinity is, so it just felt kind of like an extension of Ithaca. That like it didn't. I was still like surrounded by people my age and like still going out on a Friday night. It just was like with Guinness instead of Four Loko. So it was, it felt like a weirdly organic transition. I just had to walk farther to classes.
I love it. I love it. And it's especially when we're so young and everything is almost like a new experience. I just miss those when everything was, oh my God, this is new. How do you guys say this? What is your accent? And it's the same language, but it's just exciting.
That was pretty jarring that like every time I spoke to someone who was Irish, they were like, oh, what do you mean you're from America? What do you mean from your in New York? I was like, well, what am I supposed to sound like? Like what stereotype do you have about we don't all sound like we're from Texas or like an extra on the cast of Sopranos. Like I would often get people thought I was Canadian rather than from America, which isn't a bad thing. I just like it's just an interesting perception of like different types of accents, especially in America. We have so many types of
Yeah.
accents.
There's so many, but in the world, there is only one. I think Americans have seen and perceive under a very uniform lens. It's very kind of homogeneous in the way people understand and digest American media and pop culture. Then when you go there, it's just, I personally, I introduce myself as Colombian because it helped me with understand how it looks and where I'm from. And then now, but I lived in the US for 15 years, so explains why I can talk to you like this.
Yeah. I feel like well, there was one time Hannah and I went out together and we only spoke in like a deep Southern accent the entire time we were out, and people treated us so differently.
Like, that is such a 20-something move. You look at your friend and do you want to be someone else tonight? I want to meet this.
We had like different names, and by the end of the night, we like completely forgot about it. But that's, I mean, what else are you going to do when you're like 26 on like a pub crawl?
Yes, pub crawl. Well, I mean, honestly, when I'm traveling alone and I want to meet people, sounds lame, but that's the fastest way to meet people. Just join one of those, get a couple of beers, and then people loosen up a little and talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, when we were in Spain on that nightmare first journey, someone that we like went out with on a pub crawl in Granada ended up like calling us because we were then all in Madrid at the same time. So she like switched her hostel and came up with us. And like, I still have friends that, you know, I met 10 years ago in Thailand on so when you're going from Thailand into Laos, you can do a land border crossing, or you could do an overnight like long boat journey. And it's like the closest thing I can compare it to is like, if you think about like the ancient Egyptian boats that go up the Nile, that's kind of what it looks like, but you're going across like northern Thailand, and it takes like up to 3 days. And that there's nothing else to do but like drink and play card games and like hang out with whoever else is on the boat. So it, at least at that time, it became like a big expat thing of like, that's how you would go and meet people. And then those are people you would end up like traveling with the rest of your time. So the people I met, like going into Laos, like I met up again in Cambodia. I met up again with them in Vietnam. So it was like a really cool way to have an unintentional like network of people.
Yeah, and friendships. What's let's talk about the trip a little, because it's something that, I mean, I've dreamed a lot just doing South Asia. What was the starting point? Bangkok. Okay. So you fly from South Korea to Bangkok, or do you fly from the US?
Yeah. So I flew directly from Seoul to Bangkok. And I literally, I mean, I'd been living in South Korea for a year at that point. So I knew that I was not going to make it back to New York before my stuff did. So I put all my stuff on like a slow cargo boat. So by the time I got home 6 months later, my stuff still hadn't got there yet. But it was also like the cheapest way to send all of my belongings that I'd accumulated in a year. So I like, pared it down to like a 55-liter backpack. And the biggest thing I had in there was like my DSLR camera. And then started in Bangkok and then like slowly made my way north. I had friends who were living in Chiang Mai at the time. And then went like across northern Thailand into Laos, and then ended up doing a lot of like motorbiking down across Laos, getting to Cambodia, and then across Cambodia, Vietnam, and then I flew out of Hanoi, after like 5 months.
Oh, that's a journey. 5 months. I don't know if I have it in me. I admire people who do it, honestly.
I did it 23. I don't know if I could do it now.
Yes, that's the thing. It's just age is really a factor. I think travel is always going to be, I mean, if you're passionate traveling, which you are, like me, it just changes different, depending on how old you are. It just looks different. But
that private room at the hospital is just like so much nicer now. It's worth the extra $20.
It does, yeah. And again, privileged to have kind of like a staying income and all that stuff. Let me ask you: do you ever recall any culture shocks in that trip?
Yes, yeah. I think I did, and not in ways that I was expecting to. And really, like, I attribute that trip to really like setting up what I wanted to do as like an adult, which is kind of crazy to think about. But even going back to when I was living in South Korea, I started volunteering with Big Brother, Big Sister. They had opened a chapter there. And in Seoul's like quite close to the border, but there is another like military base north. It's this town called Ujongbu. Ujongbu is like basically your last stop before you get to like the demilitarized zone. So I was living in like central Seoul, and once a week I was taking like a 3-hour train ride up to Ujongbu to work with Big Brother, Big Sister. And I was running a rugby clinic there. And what was interesting about Ujongbu at the time is that a lot of people who live there stay in that northern part because they have family who live in northern Korea. So they have family who are still living there, they're refugees themselves, or they're the children of refugees. So it was really the first time I was exposed to just like the disparity of people who are displaced. Even, the way that people would talk about North Koreans, even though like South Korea and North Korea, from an American perspective, I was like, this is so strange. Like I thought these were like the same countries, but they've been separated for 75 years. So that kind of changed a lot about how I thought how I was traveling through Southeast Asia. And then by the time I was, Thailand, where I was traveling to, it was really like, they call it the banana pancake trail, because there's so many hostels basically from like Goa in India all through like Southeast Asia and down to like Bali, that they all serve banana pancakes to like appeal to Western backpackers. So in Thailand, I was really like kind of following that route. But not as many people go to Laos. It has one of the lowest internet and cell phone connectivity rates. It's not necessarily as like, I think in the last few years, a lot of the tourism, especially like being in between Vietnam and Thailand, has started to build up. But at least when I was there, in 2014, I was like pulling out my phrase book, trying to just like ask, like, can I buy gas from you for my motorbike type of thing. So that was the first time I was really in a country where like I couldn't even like read the language. Like at least like, before then I'd been to France, I could like read, it's the same letters. I could figure it out. Whereas in Laos, like I don't know the language. I can't read the language. I don't know anybody in this country. And it was also the first time that I really like had to think beyond like an American Western perspective, because it's not really something we're taught about in school in the United States, of like how much the Vietnam War really like moved through that area of Southeast Asia. So I ended up volunteering with a nonprofit there for a little while that was working with people who were impacted by landmines, because so many landmines from the Vietnam War are still like on the border, partially from Pol Pot's regime in Cambodia and then partially from the Vietnam War. So it was this nonprofit that worked to provide physical therapy and prosthetics for people who had been physically impacted by landmines. And I didn't know that that was like a thing. Like I knew landmines were a thing, but I had no idea that like there were still remnants of the Vietnam War that were being experienced by people living there.
That's so true. I think about it like so much time ago, so long ago, that you forget that this has a lot of generational issues. And what is great that you actually took time out of your trip where you travel to just kind of focus and help a little.
Yeah, it kind of resonated with me the entire time, especially like by the time I got to Cambodia. I really didn't know. Like I had taken a history class in high school about like different genocidal impacts throughout the world, but like, you know, what we learned about on Cambodia was like 2 weeks out of an entire semester, and it was like still in some areas like so helpful. And going to the killing fields and going to the prisons in Phnom Penh was one of the most like emotionally harrowing experiences I've ever had. And I went, this is so like truly such like 23-year-old thinking, but I was so excited for Cambodia because I'm an archaeology nerd. I really want to go to Angkor Wat, but also like I was obsessed with Lara Croft Tomb Raider. And there were scenes shot there. So all I wanted to do was like go to the places that Lara Croft went. And then you get there and it's like, you find out that like China actually owns Angkor Wat for like a short loan to the country. And it like all of these like things about like colonialism and like the different ways America and China has like approached development contexts was, yeah, it just like starting to unravel in my head really, really quickly. So I went into it thinking I was going to love Cambodia and was really nervous about going to Vietnam. Everyone told me they hate Americans in Vietnam. And I left Cambodia feeling so unsettled and then so warmly welcomed in Vietnam. And I've never met kinder people. I've never had better food. Like I wish I could have spent like my entire 5 months in Vietnam. I don't think it would have been enough. But in a similar point, in Ho Chi Minh City, there is the American War Museum. It's not the Vietnam War Museum, the American War Museum. And I went with some of the friends that I had met in Laos, going into Laos on the boat, and we went through the whole museum, and the top floor at the time was all about the current impact of the war. And it was a whole floor about how children were being impacted still by Agent Orange. And I just started sobbing because I couldn't handle the idea of like, this is not my generation, but this is like the country that I live is like still perpetuating these traumas. And I like walked out of the museum and this girl I was traveling with, Elisa, was like, what's up with you? You're usually so chatty. Like, I know that museum was like, that really sucked, but like, are you okay? I was like, no, it's so shitty to like come to these realizations so quickly. And she looked at me and just started laughing. And I was like, this isn't funny. And she's like, no, it is, because I'm a German. I had no idea that any other people were bad in World War II, except for Germany, until I like moved to Australia in college and like someone else told me there were other people involved. And I was like, this is like, you're the best person and the worst person to go through this.
Yeah. What a conversation.
Yeah. But that whole experience really like set the tone for me. And then I moved back to the US and I've been working in humanitarian aid and trying to rectify some of those mistakes for the last 10 years.
Would you tie back to your choice in your career? Would you tie back to that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially the part like around displacement, I worked on and off for refugee resettlement organizations in the last 10 years. And that to me, like now I'm working for an organization that specializes in doing like shelter and housing in emergencies and seeing like the impact that displacement can have on entire communities. I didn't have that experience before I went on that trip. So it's not probably how most people come out of their backpacking trips, but I'm really grateful for the experience. And, there were definitely like high points where like, did I get a massage in Thailand every day? Because it was like $3. Absolutely. But did I also come out of it feeling like I needed to do like more for the planet? Yeah, that too.
Massage, but also
Massage
career
also.
choice. Yeah, I think it's a mix of everything. I think as a human, so I love that from people. That's, I don't think we're entirely good or bad. We're just like a mix of a lot of things and a lot of experiences, and we just reflect a lot of stuff and we constantly changing. So I think that's fine. I love that story. I really want to thank you for sharing that. That's something I did not know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I was 27, 28 when we met. So I feel like I've known you like my entire life now, but it's not been so long.
Yeah, I talk a lot, so people do feel like they've known me all their lives.
I mean, same.
But let me ask you this. What's your next trip?
I probably have to go back to Ukraine, which to be honest, that also like kind of shifted my mindset. I had never been to Eastern Europe before, and now I want to go everywhere. Like I want to go to Lithuania. I want to go to Romania. It was just not like places I had thought about traveling to before. I will say there's like some legacy as a Jewish person that we're not super, super welcome. And I say that as like a blanket statement, but historically we've been kicked out of there. Also, I think it's somewhat been a cost thing in the past that like Western Europe is just much more accessible from a price point. And for so much of like my travel experiences, it really was based on like, well, I guess I'll go check out this city because it's $200 cheaper than going to like the main city. And I think I'm now at a point where like I can start expanding beyond that. I think there is also like, and again, maybe this is like the American perspective, but it was very like in my head, I expected this like post-Soviet bloc, like ugly concrete buildings. And Kyiv was one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. It was so colorful. The parks were so stunning, and the food was amazing. I was totally blown away. I thought I was just going to eat like pierogies and borscht every day. And like, I did eat pierogies and borscht every day, but I wasn't complaining about it. Like I wanted to. And just like the formidability, is that even a word? The fortitude of the people living there and the resiliency was like truly, truly inspiring. But yeah, I think there is just something about it that I am now like, okay, well, maybe like I should go to Riga. Maybe I should go to other cities that I can't pronounce because I don't speak any Cyrillic languages. But yeah,
to pronounce, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's for work. I know coming up, I'll likely be going to Ukraine, Turkey, and India. We'll have to hit you up for some tips about that. Personally, Mark and I are planning a 2, maybe 3-week trip to Argentina next summer, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Our summer or their summer?
Our summer, because teacher schedule.
Yes, of course. That's right. Yeah, Argentina, especially, it seems that the dollar, spending in dollars, coming in with dollars is very favorable.
Yeah.
For their inflation, which is really bad for them, actually. But I guess when you're a tourist.
But I'll give you more of my money.
Yeah. I think of every time you meet, I love Argentina. They have such a great traveling culture. You find Argentinians traveling everywhere. And I keep hearing that you get really good wine, really good meals, very affordable. And a lot of people, since they're going through very economic tough times, feels like for the past 4 years, they're welcoming a little bit of you going in there. So I think that's a component for me. Amazing country because it's beautiful, good culture, and it's cheap and people welcome you. I think it's fucking amazing.
Yeah. I also, I've never been to South America. I've been to Central, but not South America. And it just feels like a really good like entry point. I know it's crazy. Like I joke about this all the time that like I lived in Korea and Europe. Now I've been to Canada and Mexico, but it wasn't like on the priority list when I first started traveling. So I'm excited too because I think there's something about having like confidence in your travels and like telling people about your travels that makes them want to travel too. And I'm hoping to go. My friend has agreed to go with me to Argentina. He has never never really left the country. But we had a conversation. I asked him if he would consider it, and he was like, I feel like you've not. He said, I'm trying to remember how he phrased it, but it was something like, you've been to enough places and have made enough mistakes that I would trust traveling with you. And I appreciated that he was like, oh, you can get me out of a tough spot. And I was like, well, I don't know. I've never been to Argentina, but I'll do my best to not get us in a tough spot.
No, I think so. I was telling you earlier, I think of you, I look up to you in many ways, and that's one of them, which I think you've been doing this for a while. And it just, you need to make mistakes. Like any type of learning, you need to make mistakes to learn.
Yeah.
Like good lessons, and just be able to adapt and move quickly. I think travel, I love it. You're kind of always thinking in the moment. Sometimes you get a little bit overwhelmed because culture and language, but experience really helps. And I love that you're getting people excited about traveling. I try to do it with my friends as well, but in a way that it doesn't come across as bragging. It's more so as there is so much to explore in the world.
Yeah, have you heard how you ended up in like Croatia with Bouncy?
Yeah. Got a birth of my 4-year-old teenager friend I have, and it was amazing. And I never thought of it, but once you visit a country, you have a reason. You walk away with, oh my God, this is just. First, I want to go back. Second, every country has so much history, culture, and whatever you want to enjoy, right? If you experience your life through eating good food, going out, or experiencing just life in any ways, I think every country has a lot to offer. So I just need more time to do it.
And I think that's something that I struggle with travel, because there's like travel FOMO. Like there's so much more I want to see and I want to do. But then there are also places that I've like truly, truly fallen in love with. Like I could see myself living in like Sevilla for the rest of my life. That is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. I feel the same way about Hoi An in Vietnam. I love Edinburgh in Scotland. And maybe a controversial opinion, but I love France. I really love France. Every place I've been, I'm like, I would come back here. Like, maybe it's like, I feel like New Yorkers and Parisians actually have like a kinship, that it's not that we are mean, we're busy. So we just need you to like get to the point, and also don't walk in threes. There are too many tourists in our cities. You need to walk in a line. Please don't block the sidewalk. And I feel like as long as you're courteous and you walk into a shop and you're like, hello or bonjour, like people are fine. So I feel like a bit of a Francophile too. And like, all I want to do is like go back to Sevilla and show Mark, because he's never been there before and I love it so much. But I'm also like, okay, well, I've also never been to Budapest. I've never been to Sao Paulo. There's so much else that I want to do too, but I want to keep going back to these places that I love. And it's almost like hard to, it's the Sophie's choice of traveling.
Yes, absolutely. It's difficult. Sometimes it's just driven by money and deals, but there's so much to explore. And I hope we can keep doing this forever. Hey, I appreciate your sharing all this really good ideas and really good conversation.
I'm potentially have a few trips coming up, so happy to always do a sequel with you. Although I will say it's weird to see your name as Juan. I know you're Juan, but you're Fetish.
A special thanks to Shane Ivers for playing the music. You can find more music by Shane at silvermansound.com. Pulsar 2017 by Shane Ivers is licensed under CC BY 4.0.